Verse number 62. Do not think of the absolute truth, overpowered by the sense of mine. What knowledge comes from merely saying, do not? This will not come by mouthing a phrase. The absolute state is attained through relentless contemplation. Commentary. A spiritual search is generally considered to involve great effort along with feelings of frustration. It has been described as walking on the razor's edge. We have famous books like Pilgrim's Progress, and for an even more terrifying illustration of the whole path, Dante's Divine Comedy, full of all the nightmares of passing through purgatory. The more suffering encountered on the path, the more likely the book will be a classic. When Siddhartha or Prince Gautama became convinced of the pain and misery in which people live, he wanted to find a way out. With great difficulty, he tore himself away from his dear wife Yashodhara and from their newly born child Rahula. He gave up his entire kingdom and rode away to the forest with only one attendant. There he shaved off his hair, sent his horse back, and lived alone, going from one teacher to another. Each guru taught him whatever he knew, but Gautama was not satisfied. After a long search, he decided there was nothing to be learned from any master. He had to find truth for himself. Everywhere he saw ascetics undergoing all kinds of disciplines. Some had been holding their hands up for such a long time that the hands had withered and become like dried twigs. Some were hanging themselves upside down from the trees, with their legs up and their heads down. Their bodily forms had grown very grotesque. Others let their hair and nails grow long, and did not move from the place where they were sitting. Still others were trying to do away with their bodies by not eating. The future Buddha decided to outdo all of them. It is said he fasted so much that he became just skin and bones. When he touched himself on the belly, he was touching his spine. And when he touched his back, he was touching his belly. But with all this extreme mortification of the body, he did not get anything except perhaps a headache. We can also read in the life of St. John of the Cross how he would wear a robe with prickly hairs inside that would cause him great pain. He would cover it with another rag so that no one would notice that he was undergoing a painful discipline. Then he subjected himself to flogging from his fellow friars and was humiliated by them. In this way he was trying to share the pains of Jesus. You can resort to all kinds of mortifications, like the Indian yogi who sits by the wayside on a seat of nails and meditates. But does that bring you anything? It is all besides the point. There are many people who have different kinds of religious infatuation. Some beat drums and cymbals and sing and dance with hysterical frenzy. They think that by shouting God's name as loud as they can, that He will hear them and they will get realization. Some become so enthusiastic about wanting to convert others to their faith that they take their scriptures in hand and parade proudly around in the neighborhood. Whether it is convenient for their neighbor or not, they just go and sit on their head and read from St. Matthew or Ezekiel or Corinthians. They won't leave anybody in peace. believing that the whole of salvation is to be found in verse such and such. They cause so much embarrassment and vexation for others, and yet never seem to notice the effect they are having. And then there are those who assemble a whole army and march on others who do not share the same faith. They call out jihad, behead them. If they join our faith, they will be saved. Or if their heads are cut off in the name of God, they will also be saved. This is our faith. Our faith is so important. But it is not by frenzy or hysteria that you get to truth. There are so many of these beliefs. Some people think that by going on a pilgrimage from one holy place to another, or going to every church or temple, and praying to have special rituals performed for them, their sins will be expiated. Some learn how to twist and contort their bodies in 108 ways, how to sit in different postures, or how to breathe 10 kinds of pranayama, some with grunts, some with hisses, and some with hiccups. But with all this torturing of the body or the nostrils, you won't get anything. Is salvation or the highest truth or realization of the self or the absolute or God realization something you get by piling effort on top of effort? No. By working very hard, you can make money and riches, get a house, an automobile, a position in society, and many academic degrees and other honors. But that kind of amassing of your labor will not bring any realization. All those efforts are only egotistic trips. They only serve to harden the ego when treated as steps to salvation. That very ego will shield the truth you want to see away from you. Often when somebody tells you, as I just have, not to indulge in all these various trips, that they won't bring realization, you might adopt a negative attitude. You might think, okay then, I won't do anything. Let realization come whenever it comes. I will just allow things to be. If you take such an attitude, will it bring realization? No, it won't work either. If you leave yourself to the mercy of natural events, your mind will be like a monkey, running from one fantasy to another, one mood to another, one depression to another. There are so many incipient memories in you, wanting to find expression through the gratification of desires, that urge after urge will come, and you will run after them. This will only take you to greater madness and greater darkness. Then what is the way out? How about going to the best libraries and reading the thoughts of the great masters in big books? That's one way of entertaining yourself. If you learn the vocabularies of all the religions and all the big words coined by philosophers, you can certainly impress someone. Shankara said that if you become a great scholar, someone might invite you to a good feast. They may honor you, but that is not realization. In the Upanishads it says, I am Brahman. So why shouldn't I also say, I am Brahman? I am the Absolute. As Shankara also put it, a man who is crowned as king on the stage in a theatre cannot come out of the theatre and rule over the people there as a king, because he is a king only on the stage and not elsewhere. So if you say you are Brahman, you are Brahman, only in your own fantasy and not in reality. Okay, we have discarded all the egotistic trips. We have seen that mere negativity won't help, and that there is no use in just mouthing phrases. What then is the way out? You should go back to the very first verse in the book, in which it is said, "Turn your senses inward, calm down, calm your mind, just watch what is going on." You see a world outside and a world inside. You can discern one thing from that: a knower is knowing. There is a field which is known, and there is a light which is illuminating that field. Behind your seeing, there is that light. Behind your hearing, there is that light. Behind every thought, it is there. Every passing idea is illuminated by it. What is that nucleus of illumination which is in every experience? Invariably, it is the self-luminous light which is experienced as the seer. It has no break, it is continuous, it takes no effort at all to know it. In the Upanishads it is said, that is far and near. It is far when you think of realization as something which you have to achieve, God as something which you have to seek, the self as something which you have to learn about. Then it is a far-off thing, which only seers have seen and wise men have spoken of. I am an ignorant person. I don't see it. I don't get it. Will I get it in my lifetime? When these kinds of thoughts are there, it looks very far. But as Henri Bergson says, instead of going after knowledge and knowing it, if you just get into knowledge and be it, it is not at all far. It is here and now, in this very knowing. That which reveals to you that you are knowing, that is it. It is very near, it is inside and also outside. The Isha Upanishad says, it runs faster than the mind or senses, and before the mind or senses reach it, it is already there. The very light that illuminates the seer in you is also the light that has already illuminated what is seen. Before the eyes reach it and see it, the light is already there. The light of the self has already illuminated as far as you can see in the universe. All the infinitude which you come to know is nothing but the same light. It is not by breaking away from life or shunning anything that one finds realization. Nature, with its illumination, its action, and its obscuration, is going on endlessly. But that obscuration, action, and illumination are only processes that are happening within the light. You are the light, you are the seer, and the process is what you are seeing. The differentiating process is what you call nature. Nature is thus not an outside entity, not an outside factor. It is the seen. In what is experienced, there is no outside or inside. By relentless search, by continuous contemplation, one always knows this. Then you don't have to have this terrible struggle. Ramana Maharishi told all the people who came to him to just ask, "Who am I?" He didn't intend it to be turned into just another egotistic trip, with someone sitting for 10 hours and asking, "Who am I?" What are you doing? I'm doing my sadhana, asking myself who I am for 10 hours. No, man, it's not that way. You need to be a participant in all this. Live your natural life, but in and through this life, see the light which you are. When you ask, "Who am I?" it is not as a special discipline, and yet it is the only discipline. going deeper and deeper into everything you experience. You may be taking a cup of tea, eating a loaf of bread, or sharing an experience with a friend, being intimate with someone. In all these, you just need your transactional mind. But that is only one aspect of the mind. There is a deep awareness in you which is silently witnessing, constantly questioning, and continuously flowing as an all-permeating consciousness. It is calm, serene, all-filling. It is both on the surface and in the depths. Then the feverishness of your search drops away. It becomes steady, gradual, and very thoroughgoing. You no longer try to arrive at an event called realization. You are not looking for one single experience of an overwhelming nature. In one sense, you should always be overwhelmed, because there cannot be anything more overwhelming than this. You are tinier than a point, and yet in that speck of consciousness there is a vastness, an infinitude even, caught in a timeless, spaceless awareness. The infinite cycles of time and the vast space of the cosmos are all in an unutterable, silent consciousness. This is called parichinta or manana, going from one depth to another depth, knowing a little more of everything tomorrow than you know today. You should remember two things. One is when you see a form, that very form hides the reality out of which it has evolved. When you see bread, you do not think of wheat flour. When you see cloth, you do not think of cotton. When you see a pot, you do not think of clay. And when you see people, you do not think of the one evolving energy out of which they have all sprung up. When you see the world, you do not think of the absolute. So forms operate as a kind of shield of a thing's intrinsic nature. The other thing to remember is that when you think my experience, you create a wedge between you and the other. This is because of the insistence on grouping things, saying things like, this belongs to my faith. That church there, the First Methodist, is my church. The one over there, the Presbyterian, is not the right church. Those are all Christian churches. Why should I bother about them? I am a Jew, and I have a synagogue to go to. The Hindu says, my temple is in India. Until I get back there, I won't have a proper place to worship. Conceptual islands like these spring up, which block off everything else from being a part of you. You should be able to break down all these barriers, not by going around and smashing them with a sledgehammer, so to speak, but just by knowing. This gentle way of knowing, rather than making feverish attempts, is what is recommended here by Narayana Guru. People understand the hallelujah part of religion, the sensationalism, readily enough. They also understand the dreadful, tragic aspects like a crucifixion, a crusade, or a martyrdom. But they do not understand the gentle and beautiful contemplative. Jesus would withdraw from the crowd and sit in silence, gazing at the sky or walk on the beach, having for his company only the winds from the sea or the waves lapping rhythmically on the shore. It's not very impressive, but it's a much more serene, profound, and beautiful expression of what his life was really about. When he was stopped by a disabled man and spoke to him in a gentle way, it is not regarded as important. But when the same man who had been suffering from palsy got up and walked, that miraculous part alone has become associated with Christ's real life. In this way, we mark off areas in life which excite us and think that there is where God manifests. Yet we don't have to make such exclusive boundaries around concepts like God manifestation. The whole is one single manifestation. Lower the ego and turn it off. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, just by controlling from outside, inhibiting everything, you only make yourself a hypocrite. It's like putting on the brake and pressing the accelerator at the same time. First, bring down the inner pressure. Then the outer will naturally come to a close. The Guru is here suggesting to us the most gentle pressure in the search. At the same time, it is not lukewarm. It is an out-and-out search. But that search is not directed to just one isolated area. Life itself is the search. It goes on until we come to what is called Paramapadam, an absolute state. The absolute state comes when all relative aspects are seen in their relatedness within the absolute. Everything has its own niche, and you don't have to dismiss anything. It all gets placed properly in its context. There has to be a reorganization of the whole life so that things are put in their appropriate position and understood as being part of an organic whole. Once this is done, that's all. The state of being the Absolute is continuous and simple. It's not a static experience or event. When you think of it, don't think of it as a great mass with the whole world inside it. A little baby smiling is a simple thing, but within that simplicity there is no shade of pretension. It doesn't smile to please anyone, it just smiles. A little flower tosses its head in the breeze. That's an absolute event. It is not a copy of a flower or an idea of a flower. It is an absolute flower. It shines of itself. So when you think absolute, don't think it should fill the whole universe. There is a timelessness in it and an irrelevancy of the space occupied. It just is. This is understood by the Japanese poets when they write haiku. The quality of the haiku is the element of the absolute in it, which comes as just a little shimmering of its beauty, of its plainness in your heart. That's it. You don't have to explain it to anyone. You should never read haiku to someone and then give a commentary on it. That's the worst thing you could do with it. Instead, silently read it and close the book. Then just feel the serenity that pacifies you and makes you forget the world for a little while, even if only for a fraction of a moment. A fluttering leaf comes down and you gaze at it. It's an absolute experience. You don't have to be ponderously meditating, who am I? Who is seeing this leaf which is fluttering in the autumn wind? You falsify the whole situation by thinking that way. And the free translation of verse number 62 is, do not despair that you cannot own the Absolute as your private experience. What knowledge can come by mere negation? Nothing. Nor does knowledge come by merely repeating the word Absolute. It comes only by continuous contemplation.